Welcome to Powell's. Thanks for coming out tonight. It's a pleasure this evening to welcome Nathan Carson. Nathan, as many, if not most, or all of you know, is a musician, writer, and Moth Story Slam champion from Portland. He's widely known as co-founder and drummer of the internationally touring doom metal band Witch Mountain, host of the FM radio show The Heavy Metal Sewing Circle, and the owner of the boutique music booking agency Nanotier. Is that how you pronounce it? Nathan's byline can be found on hundreds of music and film-related articles in outlets such as the Willamette Week, San Francisco Weekly, Orbits, Noisy, Room Orb, Terrorizer, Metal Edge, etc. Nathan is also regularly found as a panelist, reader, or attendee on the convention circuit at H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival. And tonight, Nathan will be introducing his new novel, his first published, Starr Creek, just out from Lazy Fascist Press. So once again, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Nathan.
You guys are awesome. About 2 years ago, I went to BizarroCon at Edgefield, and I had a fragment of an unfinished story that I read there, and Ross Lockhart, the editor of Word Horde Press, walked up to me after my reading and handed me his card and said, "I'd like to hear that whole story." And I sent it to him, and it ended up in Cthulhu Patagoning. And then Cameron Pierce from Lazy Fascist read that story and some other articles and said, "I like your story, I want you to write a book." So, Cameron, thank you very much. This is would not be happening without you. I would also like to thank my parents, Peter and Jeannie, for moving us within view of Starr Creek Road when I was 11 years old. And I used to walk out there and watch the sunset and not go where the asphalt ended and the gravel began very often, unless I was going to Jeremy Freeman's house, because he lived on Starr Creek Road and survived. Chapter 1. His mama named him Puppy because she didn't know any better. Puppy liked his name just fine until he was 3. That was the first time a stranger laughed. That's when he discovered that Puppy wasn't a proper name, but rather what you call something that you'd give a name if you liked it enough to keep it. Mama kept Puppy, but she didn't give him a proper name. By the time she was gone, he'd gotten used to it. Plus, it always gave him an excuse to start a fight. At the rundown Blackberry Tavern, Puppy had a tab. When the bartenders heard his rusted truck rumble up, they'd pour him a pitcher of whatever was going stale and leave him to drink alone. Nobody shot pool with Puppy Tyler. No one asked him to dance. Sometimes he dumped his pockets on the table in a booth, hands scrambling through his belongings, but never seeming to find whatever he was looking for. Under the neon sign glow of cheap beer brands, he'd bow forehead to Formica and knock the table with gnarled knuckles until he was ready for seconds or seconds again. Eventually, he'd fall halfway out of the booth, leave without tipping or saying goodbye. The bartenders kept a red marker tally on a green paper notepad, but the balance was never in the black. Puppy couldn't sit still unless he was hammered, so he rose early most days, cursing the sun that snuck in through crannies in the old split rafter wood. In the wincing mornings, in that old hand-built house, western sunbeams crawled with tiny golden dust fires. The pinwheel sunlight was only broken momentarily by flickering crickets, flitting off to dream till moonlight next. Puppy usually woke in a fit, tense with the acrid taste of morning mouth oozing out. He had a spit spot in a corner of the floor. It was overdue for its annual splash from a bucket of creek water. Starr Creek ran cold and fast. It slithered down 40 miles of wood and field. Snow melted from the coastal mountains that loomed over the gray-green mid-valley. Most days the Coast Range wore a blanket of clouds. Thunder kept quiet more often than not. Chill, incessant night rains gave way to clear days warm enough to thaw more snow and keep the creek clear. Those waters seeped up an oil-slick rainbow moonshine of fertilizers and worse before cutting a scar through Puppy's backyard. That creek was his bathtub and playpen 6 months of the year when he was a boy. Grown up, Puppy played different. There's some seats over here if anybody's looking for a good close spot. Chapter 2, Wednesday, June 18th, 1986. Willie's fat fist connected in an uppercut to the gut. A gallon of undigested dry dog food sprayed out of Puppy's mouth on a wave of bile and beer froth. Puppy, hands on knees, hurled a few more times on the scored wood floor. Willie waddled in a circle around him, grinning like a fat cat that forgot its mange long enough to gloat over a wounded baby bird. His greasy black hair shone in the neon light and scintillating fiber-optic waterfall wall art. Before Puppy could wipe his lips of dreck, a biker boot kicked his ass out the saloon door and into the hungry blue night. Puppy had driven into the little town of Monroe a few hours prior, truck coasting on fumes, meter on E. He was half-starved, too. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. It didn't have to be that way, but he couldn't take any chances. He'd lost last time and didn't sit well with humiliation. Those lowlifes had treated him like spoor tweezed out of boot treads with a twig. Puppy eased his liver-spotted pickup into the last parking spot behind the squat, flat-topped cottage. The emergency brake ratcheted up with a dying squeal. The sign above the wood-bordered tavern door read the Golden Bough. Everyone in town called it the Boog, though, since they found it easier to abbreviate booger than do something abstract like assign a color to a formal gesture. On the flickering backlit marquee, black letters read, "Third Wed, Dog Food Eating Contest, 9 p.m., win $50. The prize was a lot more than what hadn't slipped through the holes in the pockets of Puppy's pants. The Boog was warm inside, but too crowded. Puppy knew how it felt to sleep all in a pile on a cold winter night, fighting damp drafts with the heat of shivering bodies. But awake on the verge of summer, this was overwhelming. Nowhere to go without brushing some biker's belly, some barmaid's behind, or dropping a drink in a feisty farmer's lap. Puppy wound his way to the sign-up sheet, scratched his name in pencil stub. He poured himself a mug of Oli and settled into a corner to wait his turn. The jukebox throbbed with a Harryhausen beast battle of charging guitar, tussling with writhing saxophone. Both bled each other to death over the march of drums and the crackle and burl of blown speaker blight. Puppy didn't let his beard grow warm, but neither did he fill the gnawing hollow in his bot belly. A clock on the wall in the shape of Mount St. Helens before it blew read 9:42. The bartender had one long arm and one short one, just like the clock. He used them to upend and pour a bag of Alpo into a police lineup of colored plastic bowls. One by one, bikers of all sizes, some vested, some bare-chested, took their turn snuffling face first in the dog bowls. They chugged pitchers of beer to choke down the muck. Some dumped the suds in first and ate it like cereal. Others swallowed handfuls like pills. One guy produced a bottle of homemade barbecue sauce from a shoulder holster. When someone called foul and confiscated it, he lurked away, grumbling in surrender. Another guy clamped a clothespin on his bulging, hair-infested nose. Puppy just watched and waited and sipped. He felt his hunger burble and grow. A vast man named Willie strode up to the bar. Puppy remembered him. Willie was the winner this time last month. The room got quiet. Someone pulled the plug on the jukebox and angled a lampshade like a spotlight. Embroidered on the back of Willie's denim jacket was a harp with angel wings. On the front of his shirt was a black and white cartoon mouse steering an old wooden chip wheel with his squiggly arms. The shirt didn't stretch far enough to cover Willie's navel. His exposed belly hung well past his fly. The great man picked up a full bowl with both hands. He held it aloft like a crown. After he'd surveyed the crowd, he dipped in a finger, licked it, and smiled. Then he slammed the bowl on the bar and took a stool over which his fat ass sagged. He buried his face in one, then a second dog dish, until each shone clean. Willie licked his lips when all three bowls clattered empty. Then he reached over the bar and dug into the bag to shove a final fistful into his mouth. When he chewed and swallowed, applause erupted around the room. Someone plugged the jukebox back in and blew a quarter on Eat It, which was still a big hit in Monroe. Can't just talk the talk.
Not teaching.
I hate this part. The bartender reached into the register and started counting out 10 $5 bills. Willie reached for them. Just as his pudgy fingers swept them into a stack on the counter, Puppy's hand came down to pin him. Puppy's other hand flagged in the bartender's face, fingers splayed in the universal gesture for 4. The crowd cheered even louder, and Puppy laughed half an inch toward a smile. The bartender didn't bother to wash or change the bowls. The 3 that Willie had licked still sat on the counter. A 4th that someone squeamish hadn't been able to finish came back soggy from the sink. The bartender topped them all off with the rest of the bag, then dumped dust crumbles from the bag's bottom over the top. It looked like brown sugar topping, but smelled of dirt, hair, and horse meat. Puppy was too hungry to care, and he needed that 50 to make it home. Halfway through the 3rd bowl, he coughed. The crowd grew silent, then exhaled when he went back to eating. He held his empty mug out, and someone overfilled it till it spilled. Puppy chugged and chewed, tears streaming from his eyes. He dug back in, now doubled down and then some. By the start of the 4th bowl, he was full to bursting. His body was in a fit over the cruel trick he'd played on it, and still more pellets scraped down his throat to stack in a pile that reached from intestinal pits to esophageal maw. Puppy set the 4th bowl upside down on the bar like a shot glass. A long, gassy belch erupted from his mouth. He reached for the money and slid it into his rumpled shirt pocket. The room was still dead quiet. He took one step, then another toward the front, picking his way around statuesque bikers that flexed in silent judgment. Puppy had just reached the exit when he heard the creak of an old floorboard, saw a shadow engulf his own, and felt Willie's weight behind him. So, there are lighter parts of this book. There are fun parts. If you guys want to hear something lighter, raise your right hand and whimper, "Hold me." And if you want to hear something else darker and more fucked up, raise your left hand and say, "Hurt me."
We came for the pain.
That's why I love you all. There's no dog food in this chapter. Willie whistled Turkey in the Straw as he sauntered around the back of the book. Someone with huge balls had parked a rice burner by his hog. He looked left, then right. No one was watching that he could see. Then he bent his knees a bit, fumbled for his fly, and let loose a hot stream on the aerodynamic Honda Saki or whatever it was. Across the dark lot, Puppy clenched the wheel of his pickup and gritted his teeth. His mouth still burned with the taste of the gasoline he'd siphoned out of Willie's tank. Willie shook, then zipped. He mounted his own steed and gave it a few kicks before it finally leapt to life. Still soused from the night's escapades, he struggled a bit to strap on his brain bucket. None of the gang had been happy about losing their God-given freedom, but the helmet law had come nearly 10 years back, the same year as Star Wars. At this point, there was no sense in risking a ticket. He pulled the vented gloves over his bulging pig knuckles, revved the engine, and peeled into the night. Puppy counted to 6 and started his truck. Willie rode north on Highway 99. He knew every curve of that road. He wove between the white and yellow lines just to entertain his big bad self. In his side mirror, he glimpsed a single headlamp about a quarter mile behind. Must be one of the boys, he thought. Monroe didn't have motorcycle cops. He gave the throttle a touch more wrist. The round yellow light behind kept getting closer, though. Someone's in a hurry to get home, thought Willie. Wonder who it is. He revved his engine to give a bit of race and felt the compression sag. Pretty soon the other bike was right on his ass. Willie crossed into the oncoming lane to let it pass. That's when he realized that he wasn't seeing a bike at all, but rather a truck with one headlight out and one vengeful hillbilly leaning halfway out the driver's side window clutching a crowbar. Willie knew he could outrun Puppy's tired old rig. He tried to gun his Harley, except the needle on his gas gauge was now deep in the red. At full throttle, he was losing speed. Puppy's forearm flexed as he swung the crowbar wide. It caught the brim of Willie's helmet. Then Puppy locked up the brakes. Willie's weight would easily have broken his arm if he'd held on. Puppy let go the moment he felt Willie disconnect from his bike. The Harley carried on like a ghost had climbed aboard for a wild midnight run. It was a short ride. The bike ran out of road and bounced end over end into a wooded ravine. Willie was lying on the center line, still trying to unhook the crowbar from his face. Puppy stomped back around and kicked Willie in the stomach. Then the little man dragged the big man by the crowbar toward the back of his truck. Each time Willie struggled, he got another kick. With all the beer, the hard fall, and the blood in his eye, there wasn't much he could do. Puppy fumbled him up into the bed of the pickup, tied him down with an assortment of rotting bungee cords, and then covered him with a weathered tarp. As the truck lumbered back into motion, Willie bumped and bled and cursed for a full 15 minutes. After that, he started to pray. When the truck finally lurched to a stop, Willie tried to recall all the country roads he knew in the mid-valley. Just where might he be after 20 minutes of pavement and another 12 to 15 on gravel? Too many possibilities. Puppy seemed in no hurry to fetch him once they'd stopped. Time went by, and Willie eventually passed out into a painful, dream-haunted sleep. The sky was still dark when Puppy came for him at last. He yanked the tarp off and put a boot on Willie's blubbery chest. He wrapped both hands around the crowbar that was still embedded in Willie's stall helm. As Puppy pulled, Willie screamed. The claw end of the crowbar was hooked in the corner of Willie's eye socket, which broke at the same instant as the helmet. Puppy dislodged the bungees from the sides of the truck. With great effort, he dragged Willie feet first out of the bed and head first onto the ground. "You let me go, puppy dog," Willie said between sobs. "You know Angel's Harp will come for you. Ain't gonna do you no good messing with me." A kick in the mouth shut him up again. Willie spat out a front tooth. He stuck his tongue in the socket to staunch the blood and said no more. Puppy propped Willie up against the trunk of a tree and fixed the bungees around it. Again, he picked up the crowbar, glowering down at the bleeding bulk who had publicly shamed him 2 months running. The taste of dog food and gasoline churned in his stomach over, and he vomited naught but stomach acid bile right onto Willie's wincing, bleeding socket. The eye rolled up at Puppy and burned in the first ray of dawn light. It saw no mercy. "Now I want you," Puppy said, "to bark like a dog." So yeah, like I said, there are other characters and fun moments. There's D&D nerds, there's heavy metal kids, there's lots of stuff that happens. But anyway, I've got time for questions, so if anybody has questions, this would be that time.
So,
Micro.
where exactly are we talking about here geographically? Where you?
So Starr Creek is off Bell Fountain Road, which is south of Corvallis, north of Eugene. I don't really want a ton of people taking pilgrimages out there because those people want to be left alone. Definitely, life on Starr Creek Road is not the same now as it was for most of the 20th century. I think that it's been those people have been scared out of there, but there were a lot of people living without, running like hot water, some places without electricity, like lots of real deliverance style stuff going on out there. And I just took everything that I'd known and every urban legend I heard growing up and just tried to make it much worse.
Can you speculate on the relationship between Halley's Comet and the events of the story?
Well, this story takes place in 1986, which is when Halley's Comet was at its most recent perihelion. There are also events mentioned in the story that take place 76 years earlier, in 1920. Is that right? 10, thank you, 1910. And the next book I'm working on takes place 76 years after this story. Anybody else?
When you're creating secondary characters to the story, do you find you're doing it more for the purpose of the plot or more for the color and the environment?
A lot of the way this story came together was creating the characters first and seeing where those characters and the events led them, because I didn't want the characters forced into roles or just being archetypes or even just being tropes, and I didn't want them to have to do anything for the convenience of the plot. So I really tried to just set up a number of characters and a number of situations and then follow that to the somewhat inevitable conclusion.
When was the last time you went and visited some of these areas, just like since you've written the book?
I took an advanced reader copy to Starr Creek Road and took pictures of it by the sign and on the blacktop just a couple months ago.
Like Greenberry Tavern.
I need to set foot in the Greenberry Tavern and the Long Branch. Golden Bough is in here as the Long Branch, and that's where, when I was 10 years old, I would see the marquee saying dog food eating contest, and like my 10-year-old mind was just like, what's that about? Why does that happen? But I feel like, I tried to have a good time with it. Anybody else? Yes.
How many times have you eaten dog food in the service of this?
This is the second performance. Maybe the last.
It's not going to get any better.
When you were pouring that in, it looked almost like it was Trix or some sort of cereal. Is it really dog food?
However, there is a Starr Creek cake that Aaron had made that we can all enjoy when I'm signing books right here in just a minute. No dog food in the cake. Any other questions? Well, I really appreciate you guys all coming out for this. This is awesome. So thank you very, very much. Thank you, Powell.